Welcome to Surviving Roots, the podcast where we journey through the complexities of our emotions together. I'm your host, Carrie Fund, and I'm here to guide you on a path of self-discovery, understanding, and healing. In each episode, we'll explore a range of emotions and experiences, from navigating grief and trauma to managing stress and anxiety. Through candid conversations, expert insights, and practical strategies, we'll uncover the tools you need to navigate life's emotional landscape with resilience and grace. So, let's embark on this transformative journey together. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself this time. This podcast is for you. Hi, everyone. I am thrilled to be introducing my guest today, Amanda Kuda. We will be talking about living a sober, curious life. Amanda Kuda is an alcohol-free lifestyle expert, a holistic life coach, speaker, and author living, working, and playing in Austin, Texas. As a coach, Amanda helps ambitious, soul-centered women stop drinking and start manifesting the life they deserve and desire. She teaches a modern approach to personal development, self-actualization, and spiritual enlightenment through the lens of elective sobriety. Amanda's first book, Unbottled Potential, was recently released, and I loved it. Welcome, Amanda.
Hello, Carrie. So good to be here today.
I am so thrilled to be talking to you. Your book was I just can't wait to get into it and share with everyone. But it really hit home with me, and I am so excited to talk to you and about your book today.
Well, writing a book is such a big passion project, and a lot of tears are shed. So it's so great to be sharing it with someone who's received it so open-heartedly. I appreciate that.
Oh, amazing. Well, I will say we do share a mutual connection, the lovely Rochelle Fredson, who is the book proposal mastermind.
Yes.
And I heard about your book through her, and I picked it up immediately. And your book was like a splash of brilliance with shots of insights poured into every page. And it does sound like I'm making a cocktail right now.
I love it. Well, it's a little mocktail.
A little mocktail. But I have to tell you, it really is this treasure chest of wisdom that really challenges our preconceptions of drinking alcohol. And it really allows readers to see the world of sobriety through a different lens. So thank you for this gem.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to me. That truly does.
You know, during the pandemic, we kept hearing about this word, sober curious, and many of us started to explore and navigate our relationships with lots of things: alcohol, food, marriages, careers, our motherhood. But I will say, I think alcohol was a big one for all of us. And there's so many reasons why your work is important and impactful. And I would love to know what you think about, like, why does sober curious resonate with so many people?
Yeah, I think for so long that there has been this stigma around sobriety that's really been dictated by kind of the world of AA and 12 steps and recovery and addiction, which is absolutely very important work. But the reality is that the majority of drinkers don't drink in the addiction area, they drink in the gray area. And so there's this, hesitancy for people who, well, I don't identify as that, as someone who's addicted, as someone who has a substance use disorder. So therefore, I cannot quit drinking. And I'm an intelligent woman. You're an intelligent woman, but I cannot tell you how pervasively that idea stuck in my head. Well, because I don't check the boxes or meet this criteria, I am not allowed into this club in this way. And how privileged of me to call sobriety a club, because I did have the choice that I could just quit drinking. But again, it just seemed impermissible for me. So one of my mentors and a really profound writer in the sobriety space, Ruby Warrington, she created this phrase to help kind of ease people into this concept. And it's called sober curious. And it allows you to have curiosity about sobriety, to be interested in this as a lifestyle, but not actually commit to it or call yourself sober. And I think that it was this really enlightening and permission slip giving phrase that allowed people who didn't identify with addiction and recovery, and maybe even some who do, but still wanted to kind of tiptoe into the sobriety space to explore this lifestyle in a less rigid kind of way. And I
Right.
think that it's really beautiful, and that the pandemic honestly opened up so many conversations about it, because people really came to two different pathways in that time, which is, oh, wow, I don't have any social obligations. Therefore, I could stop this social habit that I've been leaning on for my entire life. Or, oh my goodness, I'm feeling all these big emotions. I have nowhere to escape. I'm really going to lean into this habit that has been a self soothing mechanism. And so, people, and then they realize, oh, wait a second, this is getting too extreme. I need to reevaluate this. So, the pandemic, for better or worse, gave social drinkers an out, and it gave emotional drinkers almost a pressure cooker by which they could realize, wow, this is something I've been doing too much of, and I need to find a more productive strategy. So that kind of answers probably two questions. But sober curious is this really great phrase that's a permission slip. And then the pandemic itself kind of gave us an observation tank by which to kind of experiment with sobriety in some different ways.
And it's so true. And I have to tell you, that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons I really picked up your book, because there are so many books out there about sobriety that deal with addiction issues and recovery, which are so important. But if you don't identify in one of those lanes, you you sort of shy away from the reading. You just think, social drinking, we don't really think of that as anything that's like an unhealthy habit, and or think that we even have the choice or need a permission slip to even break up with alcohol. And let's be honest, like if you really look at what alcohol is, it's a neurotoxin. It really has harmful effects for our brain, our nervous system. And when I was reading your book, I thought to myself, if I had a food allergy and I was allergic to a kiwi, I wouldn't go out and order key lime pie in Miami for dessert every night, or
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't make myself sick intentionally. So why do people keep drinking alcohol if it has a negative impact on our lives? Like, why do we do this, Amanda?
Yeah. And it's so awful, because I agree. It's a sabotaging ourselves, but it's because the perceived benefit that we think that we get from alcohol is so more heavily weighted than the perceived consequence. And also because the consequence is so normalized. It's something we kind of make a joke about, I'm hungover or whatever, that it's become so socially acceptable. But I think the bigger issue at hand, the reason that we do it, is a self-esteem issue. And it's hard to say, as someone who outwardly I am self-confident and I work with self-confident go-getters, ambitious women who are high achievers, who no one would say that they have a self-worth or a self-esteem issue because their self-confidence is so high. But at the end of the day, the thing that's constantly communicated to me is that they don't believe they're worthy and deserving of the happiness they really, really, really desire. And they don't believe that they have what it takes to handle whatever the world throws at them. And so in both of those scenarios, they turn to alcohol. And when you don't have a fundamental belief that you're worthy and deserving and capable, of course you might turn to something else that kind of gives you a shortcut
Yeah,
into a different world or into a different experience. But at the end of the day, alcohol doesn't help make you more confident or less anxious, or else you would eventually stop needing it. And it's
right.
just a cheat that we're using. And unfortunately, the cheat doesn't give us any lasting benefit.
It's so true. I don't think anyone would wake up and say, I don't want to live my best life, or I don't want to be my full potential.
Mhm.
But we still risk the hangovers, we mess with our quality of sleep, our mood. And even I know for me, like my skincare nighttime routine, like I don't know how many times I go to bed with my sunscreen and my makeup on because of just like two glasses of wine.
Mhm.
Um, I would like for you to discuss, like, what does it mean living our full potential? Like, what does that look like and what does that feel like?
Yeah. I break down in my book is called Unbottled Potential. So it's all about
So great.
breaking through to this best life. And I think that we have a predisposition that potential has to do with some sort of professional goal that you've met. And while that's a huge part of it, especially for us in the United States, that's only a small part of what your potential is. It's actually like full 360 self-actualization. It is, are you living your personal potential? Are you meeting your goals and achieving your dreams and your desires? It's your physical potential. Do you feel, vibrant in the body that you have? It is your relationship potential. Do you feel connected and reciprocal in your relationships? Do you feel, healed as possible in the relationships with your family? Are you expressing your spiritual potential? Are you feeling connected and devoting the time that you need and want to that spiritual power of your own understanding? And there's all of these different facets. Are you expressing your emotional potential? Do you feel able to experience and express emotions at both ends of the emotional range, from deep grief to, joy and elation? And most people who drink on, honestly, most people, but most people who drink on a frequent basis, the answer is no, because we've stifled that. And on some level, it's because we don't know that we're worthy. Again, it's a self-worth thing. But one of the books that I read so many times to help understand why I was keeping myself stuck in this cycle is a beautiful book by a man named Gay Hendricks. It's called The Big Leap. I don't know. Have you ever read it?
No, I haven't. The Big Leap.
Okay. It is one of my favorite books. I read it or listen to it probably once a year. And the big hypothesis in this book is that most of us have an upper limit problem. So we have a threshold for the joy and the abundance and the love that we permit ourselves to achieve. And once we get to that threshold, we do something small, tiny, imperceivable to sabotage ourselves. And what a more imperceivable way to sabotage ourselves and keep ourselves small and keep ourselves from shining at our biggest and brightest and boldest than by drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
And, specifically for women who were always kind of told, hey, don't cause too much of a stir. Don't, get in anybody's way. Don't ruffle any feathers. Don't be too big, too bright. Don't, call too much attention to yourself, because that might be unsafe, or people might call you the B word, or, no one will ever want to marry you, or no one will want to be your friend because you're too, big and gregarious or not humble enough. It's so easy for us to find this little way to cause ourselves to play small. And it's really messed up that we do that to ourselves. But I'll tell you what, I was able to fool myself for the longest time, because outwardly I was checking all the boxes. I had the good job. I was getting the promotions. I was in the right social circle. I was getting the magazine articles or whatever that said, you've got it. You're doing great. But on the inside, those achievements didn't match to what I was truly capable of and what I really wanted. Sure, they were big achievements, and for somebody
Okay.
else, that might have been their dream, but it wasn't mine. And so I felt unfulfilled. And I think a lot of women are experiencing this, but they just never had anyone give a name to it or call them out and call them up into, hey, you're actually worthy and deserving and capable of so much more. What if you got out of your own way and stopped playing small? What would that feel like? And in my world, alcohol is the way that we do that.
I love that. I'm really connecting and feeling seen with the whole lack of self-worth and things like that, because I know with a lot of the things that I do, I have learned that you really do have to feel your feelings to deal with things so you can heal and move on from them. And I do come from a place of low self-worth and low self-esteem just from my upbringing. And I am not a huge drinker, but I am a social drinker. I was in New York City for 16 years. I'm in Miami for 10. And my inner critic, my imposter syndrome, my nerves and anxiety, the first thing I'll do is I'll pour a glass of Prosecco or champagne before going to a dinner, just so I've turned down the volume of all the inner critics, and just so I can go and have fun and relax a little bit. But it's so true, because I would say about a year and a half ago, I decided when I first started working with Rochelle that I was just going to stop drinking. Here I am creating this book proposal. I need to feel all of the things that are happening so I can write about them. And it lasted about 8.5 months. And
Mhm.
I was vibrating on another level. I don't know if it was because because alcohol doesn't do any of those things. It doesn't truly relieve anything. It just temporarily numbs the anxiety or the fear and all of that stuff. So then the next day it's all still there, but then you sort of feel like crap because you're hungover. So I literally cut all of that drama out and really focused on myself. And I don't know, through just being present and feeling truly connected. Like, I remember after those 8 months when I took my first drink to celebrate for like a nutcracker event or something like that. And I don't even know why. I think because it was a holiday and celebration. I don't even know why I broke the sober curious journey of just cutting alcohol. out of my diet, but I did. And I still remember to this day sitting in the theater watching the Nutcracker. I literally felt myself separate from myself after I took a couple sips of that cocktail. I literally felt a physical separation, and I knew then I had messed up. I knew then I had messed up. And it really is true. Like in terms of just being connected to yourself and really feeling whole, like you're living wholeheartedly. Like it really is crazy. I wish
It
everyone
is.
could get a taste of that just to see what it truly means. Because
Right, but you had to have enough space from it to then go back into it and feel that like kind of dissociation is what you described, kind of like floating
yeah,
above your body. And you would never have realized that had you maybe even trickled down and tried to moderate and drink a little less, because when alcohol is in your body, you're still having those effects. And so you needed this kind of clear space so that you could see the juxtaposition and the difference between what it feels like to be clear-headed and connected and tapped into your intuition and tapped into spirit and creativity versus what it feels like to go into that zone, which some people like that state of like feeling a little disconnected. But when you feel how powerful it is to be in
yes.
your full intuition and then you dip back out of it, it kind of feels eerie and scary and discombobulating.
It really does. And you just brought up two good points. Like you truly are connected to like your spirit and your intuition. And it's amazing when I think back about like even in New York City with the whole Carrie Bradshaw effect, which you mentioned in your book. Like I moved to New York when I was 22, and Carrie, like, Sex in the City was not reruns. I was watching it with my girlfriends. If I could count the number of cosmopolitans and martinis and Manolos that I drank through my 20s, I don't know. It sort of makes me like not regret, but I think, gosh, all that potential that I was sort of numbing or suppressing, where would I have been now if I literally was using like my truest self, my highest power, like through that entire 10 years in New York City? Like,
Oh,
it really is crazy. And I
it
do want to
is.
talk to you about the Carrie Bradshaw effect, because when I read that part in your book, it really is a culture. Like I even started, I mean, I grew up on a horse ranch in West Virginia, and I started watching Sex and the City. I moved to go to grad school, and first thing I did was I bought a pair of Manolos and I started drinking Cosmopolitans. And I don't even like juices, but there I found myself with the Carrie Bradshaw effect. Like, what do you think today? Like, what's our culture? What's the Carrie Bradshaw effect today that's happening, do
Yeah.
you think?
It's, I have a deficit, of course, and you do as well, that we know the Carrie Bradshaw effect because we lived it. And just to explain to anyone who that's not clear to, that's my way to explain this like phenomena of, okay, this is my representation, this is my visualization of what a sexy, fun, sophisticated woman looks like. For me, that was Carrie Bradshaw and her friends on Sex in the City. That's what female friendships look like. So I built these archetypes in my mind of how you should perform and behave if you wanted to live this type of life. And for some people, it might be Mad Men or whatever that was generationally for you. And I think it's really interesting right now if we look in culture. Now, I'm in my late 30s, so I'm not sure what the kids these days are doing necessarily. But I have to imagine that, and I do know some different statistics that actually young individuals, Gen Z, are drinking a lot less than we drank in our heyday because some of them are just more introverted. Some of them are using other substances, and some of them think alcohol is gross. They've come to this realization much more quickly than we did. But there's also this whole new open runway of people who they can look up to. So, we grew up in the era that, there wasn't so much internet. There were fewer shows to watch. So you got funneled into a couple of different archetypes. I think I could pinpoint for our generations which of those archetypes you might have just because there were 5 or 6 popular shows. So you wanted to
Right.
be a Carrie Bradshaw, or you wanted to be I don't know who the characters were on Mad Men, but you wanted to be these different people. Those were
Yeah.
your idols. Those were the sexy, sophisticated people. But now we have this new influx of influencers. And so it kind of depends upon what's your shtick? What is the thing that you value? And thank goodness, I'm certain that there are influencers that are talking about therapy and wellness and personal development, which I think is so cool that that generation is bringing that to the forefront and making it cool and okay. But
Yeah.
then I also know that there's people, I'm on TikTok because my publisher wanted me to be, and I'm actually learning to love it. But there's this influencer, Alex Earl, who was was and has been the hottest thing on TikTok. And I responded to a couple of her videos that are about drinking. And it's no different than what I thought, 10 or 15 years ago about alcohol,
Yeah.
that situations were boring when I was not drinking and, all of these things. So it just, I think that there's a bigger variety of who young people could look up to as their Carrie Bradshaw, but it's also all over the place.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say what they're embodying at this point.
That's good to hear that generations like now that are considering alcohol like not like gross and not as cool and things like that. That makes me happy considering I have young kids and it's all about like I don't want my kids as they get older to spend the amount of time I've had to like reparent and undo. I'd
Mhm.
rather them just have these inner tools. Like I didn't really connect probably to my inner intuition and my highest sense of self until I was like 40 and I'm 46 now. I would like for my kids to be doing that like now. So
Yes. Yes.
it's really all an inside job. With people listening right now, in your book, you say you don't need to have a drinking problem for alcohol to be holding you back. So there could be people listening now that are saying, well, it doesn't hold me back. Like, I just don't relate to this. Well, what does that mean? Like, how does somebody know if it's in fact holding us back?
Yeah. And I think that I imagine that someone who is just loving their relationship with alcohol and disinterested in this conversation probably hasn't made it this far. So I imagine if you're still listening, that you probably have a sense that maybe your relationship with alcohol has um, outlived its welcome or outworn its welcome. And there are some, I think that the technical question that we're taught to ask is, do I have a problem with alcohol? Am I powerless over alcohol? Those are straight from the AA playbook. And the unfortunate thing is that's not necessarily the most productive question to ask, because when I asked myself that question, I took the quiz online, I asked my therapist, and the answer was a resounding no. And
Mhm.
so I had to start manufacturing questions for myself that helped me get at the thing that my soul already knew, because I knew intuitively, even though I wasn't fully connected to my intuition, I had this sense that alcohol was holding me back. And here's how I figured it out. I had at that point, to try and live my best life, I had started doing all of the things that I could think of to be my most productive, abundant, self expressed, healed self. I was going to therapy. I was going on retreats. I was reading self help. I was praying. I was meditating. I was doing hot yoga. I was, working out and tracking my macros and micros or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of it felt like I was doing the right things, but nothing seemed to move the needle. And what I realized at the end of the day was I was doing that to feel good, but I was also doing that to balance the scale, because I'd heard that you can do work hard, play hard. You can do all of these things and they will somehow outweigh or outsmart the negative effects that alcohol is having on your life. But when I wasn't making as much progress mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, professionally as I wanted, I could have chosen a couple of different belief systems. Either one, I'm fundamentally flawed and it doesn't matter what I do, I will
Mhm.
never succeed and be the person that I want to be. And that was a very tempting self-deprecating choice. Or I could have thought, I wonder if it's not so much about doing more. I wonder if it's doing more good things, doing more positive things like the therapy and the meditation and journaling. What if it's about doing something that is taking away, that's detracting from my life a little less?
Right.
And as I looked around at everything that I was doing in my life, the only really, really detracting behavior was alcohol. And let me tell you what, Carrie, I didn't want that to be the answer because it was such a huge part of my identity
Yeah.
and my persona. So I tried again to ramp up all of the positive things, only to feel like I was spinning my wheels. And so at the end of the day, I said, what is the most unproductive thing in my life? What would it be like to remove that thing and do an experiment and see, could my life be better? And I had already asked myself, might my life be better without alcohol? Is it possible that alcohol is holding me back? Can I intuit if alcohol is keeping me stuck in some areas? And I didn't have proof, again, because I was doing pretty well. But
Yeah.
internally, because I didn't feel the way that I wanted to feel, and internally, because I wasn't achieving what I wanted to achieve, even though I was doing all of the work, the only two options were I suck and I'm bad, or there's something else that sucks and is bad. And that one felt like a better option to me. And so getting alcohol out of the way became the most obvious, yet the most uncomfortable option.
Yeah. I mean, it does like, for example, I was supposed to have cocktails and go to the social club this evening. And I was finished reading your book last night and I canceled my plans because I was like, you know what? It's not that I'm missing out. What I'm going to be gaining is a good night's sleep, some more quality time. I'm going to wake up fresh tomorrow. I'm actually going to take that 6:30 a.m. workout class. Like all of the things are actually going to bring me so much joy and to make me feel good. And I'll see my friends tomorrow at a kid's birthday party. Like it really is just being sort of conscious and aware of how you truly want to feel, like what the priority is in life. And I know it can be really hard. Like it was really hard for me to cancel on my friends this evening, but I know I'm going to be gaining so much more by doing other things this evening that are going to bring me like pure joy and happiness and health. But for people that are listening, what are some tips? And I wish I would have known you a year ago before I took that sip of champagne at the Nutcracker. What are some tips to stay committed to this? Because I had 8.5 months under my belt, and I don't even know. I unconsciously just thought, oh, time to celebrate. Book proposal's done. I'm at the ballet. It's winter time. Like I just didn't even pause.
Yeah.
What are the tips to stay committed? Because I'm going to do this again. I am going to do this again. This conversation, your book has inspired me, and I'm going to do it again. How do I stay committed?
Yes. So I want to give some really practical and also some kind of esoteric answers to
Okay.
that, because the first piece is you have to, I think that maybe you, when you're describing what you did what you did in this past year, you didn't really know what the end goal was. And the end goal that I have for my clients is for alcohol to become insignificant in their lives. And in order for that to happen, you can't just remove it and hope that you forget about it, because the reality is we've used alcohol as a tool to numb emotional discomfort and to kind of outsmart social discomfort. So really what we need are some tools to help us get comfortable in those emotional and social situations. So the first thing that you can do is make sure that you have someone or something or some processes in place to help you basically get caught up where alcohol has stunted your growth. So if you've always been using it as a tool for emotional soothing and social lubrication, you need to then have some sort of other process to get those things really so that you can develop those skills. The next thing is that you have to start focusing on allowing yourself to create a life that is beyond your wildest dreams, that is the life you deserve and desire, and also believing that you're worthy of it and deserving of it. So some of that is self-worth, some of that is clarity, and some of that is taking the aligned action toward those things. And I find that once you have the tools to show up for life in the ways that you hadn't been doing before, and you have a life that's quite different from the life that you were living when alcohol was in the picture, all of a sudden it just won't occur to you to have a drink. Like that is not your go-to. And I think that that's a really powerful place to be at. Now, in order to get there, you do have to make some commitments. Like, I'm not going to drink. My starting point for my clients is always 90 days, because I think that you need that point of clarity in order to have some sort of juxtaposition and comparison, but
Mhm.
also to lean in and start doing the work. There's a lot of resets and quick fixes out there. And I think those are all good for testing the waters. But if you really want to make that commitment, we need to start with 90 days and then reevaluate from there. So, having a standard commitment, having some processes in place to work on yourself, and then at the end of the day, making sure that you know this, and this is the esoteric part, that when you have success and when you have joy and when you have celebration in your life, that doesn't mean that you have to drink. What if that meant that you got to experience that fully, that you got to be in that moment of, wow, I just completed my book proposal, or I just made this huge accomplishment. And oh my goodness, I'm sitting here watching this amazing production and I get to be present and experience it. And that's the beautiful part. But we have to do some societal reprogramming as well, so that
Yeah.
we're thinking about those experiences differently and allowing ourselves to be present and have that to be the joy versus this, oh, I deserve or need a drink to celebrate right now because that's what I do. And
Yeah.
that's all part of, I think that you can get to that as part of kind of that rewiring and reworking process.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you said 90 days because when I was on that 8 month plus journey, it was about 3 months where it all sort of clicked in for me.
Yes.
People would say, my friends were like, "Oh, you're not drinking?" And I would be like, "Oh no, I'm focusing on this. I need to be present." I would just use my writing because, people get very uncomfortable when you decide to like not drink at lunch or not have a drink on a Friday night. But it was around 3 months that it really clicked. My sleep fell into place. I was really comfortable with myself, and even the feelings that even the uncomfortable feelings I was comfortable with, like, because I knew like I was going to handle it. Like, it's just so
Yes.
interesting. I got this complete sense of inner power where like my inner voice became louder and the inner critic and imposter syndrome sort of became dimmer. And
Yes.
I just found this new sense of power. And it was around 3 months that it all just sort of came together. And I think around 3 months is when it just fueled me until the Nutcracker.
Yes. Yeah.
But I didn't
It's
have the
so
right
common to
tips
do
in
that.
place. I didn't have those tips in place that you mentioned, the societal, like I could celebrate in other ways by just being present and being having joy in that moment. Um,
Well, I just want to say for you, I'm actually glad you had that experience because for me, after I quit, I didn't have any tools to support myself. I knew that I just had to keep barreling through. So even though I floundered with my relationship with alcohol for about a year in my sober curious period, once I decided that was it, I was off to the races. But I think it's also really powerful. And I don't want you to beat yourself up for that decision because then you got to see the difference.
yeah.
You were able to see the clear difference so that you know unequivocally, wow, that being alcohol free and being clear and powerful and in my intuition and ready to go towards my goals is way better than this feeling that I experienced at, having the glass of champagne at the Nutcracker, knowing that you didn't even get, I mean, maybe you did, but I didn't hear that you got like plastered and obliterated at that event. And that was,
No.
even just one drink, you felt the significant difference of, oh, that doesn't actually feel as good as I thought that it did before.
Yeah, it actually, I felt sort of sad after I finished that glass of champagne. And then I quit drinking because I didn't like the way, normally alcohol would calm my nerves and my anxiety, and I would like the way that I felt, but I actually did not like the way that I felt.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped, but it's so interesting, this word sober, it's like, what's another word? Like, people become so uncomfortable with this word. There's a negative connotation because you say, "Oh no, I'm sober," but then you feel like, "But I didn't have a drinking problem," but people will think I had a drinking problem, or I'm not drinking because then maybe if I tell people I'm not drinking, then people will maybe think that I was like an alcoholic. Like, we tell ourselves these stories. Like, what is another word besides sober? Like,
Yes, I identify as alcohol free. I usually say
alcohol
that.
free.
And also, not that I like indulge in other substances, but it also offers the freedom that if that is something that for I'm not a recreational person, but let's say I wanted to do a healing mushroom ceremony with
Yeah.
someone, like that allows me the spaciousness to do that. Some people, for sober for them is no substance, nothing at all. And for some people, sober is you had a problem and you quit, and who cares? But the problem is that in our society, different groups kind of own these phrases, and it's really hard to rewire our understanding of that ownership. So if there's this other phrase like sober curious, alcohol free, I also use the term electively sober, though I think that sometimes requires still an explanation. But I think alcohol free is to sobriety what, dairy free or
Gluten
gluten
free.
free is to food
Yeah.
and or to healthy diets and food allergies or preferences. And so I think that can communicate what I'm doing well enough that I don't have to over explain it.
I love that. I love that. And it's so interesting too. I'm going to start using alcohol free, but isn't it so interesting that you could be at a gathering or a party or a luncheon, and if you say alcohol free, I feel like there's so many questions to follow. But if I said gluten free or dairy free, no one would
Yeah,
even,
people
they
got
would
it.
move on. They'd be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, we don't have to order that appetizer. We can do something else." But alcohol free, anything, it just turns into a bigger conversation. People get so uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But you just brought up a good point. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. It's typically more about that other person and their relationship with alcohol
Yeah.
than what they're saying about you. But it's easier for them to push it back to you and kind of hot potato the problem back to you. And I think that we are coming to a place where it is, especially in larger cities, in metropolitan areas, a lot more well recognized. I think in smaller, more rural places that it's still even gluten free, and some place that is a little more rural might still be
Yeah.
controversial or misunderstood. And I think we're coming to a place where more people understand it and are open to it. And yet, because alcohol has such a big place in our society, there's definitely still going to be some discomfort around it. And I believe that you can either choose this as a path that is like a sentence to you, or as something that's an empowering choice. And it's all in your own take on it and your own presentation for it as well. And so I've rarely had anyone when I deliver like, oh hey, I'm not a drinker anymore. I don't drink anymore. I'm alcohol free or what, however I say it. I've rarely had pushback, and it all has to do too with my tone and the way that
Yeah.
I've chosen to embody it. And I know that anyone at their own individual level can find that way too. And that people who love and care about you and support you, while that decision might make them a little uncomfortable, at the end of the day, they want you to be happy and well. And if they communicate to you in some way that they actually don't want that, then that should be a clear sign to, take some space from that person in your life.
That's a very good point, because going back to the kiwi allergy, if I was highly allergic to kiwi or kiwis made me vomit, my friends, the ones that are giving me kiwi, I should probably question the friendship
Yes, for
and
sure.
the lack of support with the kiwi allergy. So I feel like sometimes, to put it into perspective, I have to remove alcohol and put in like a fruit or gluten and, see how that all responds. Um, you're an expert, a coach, a speaker, an author through your career journey. Could you share one impactful piece of advice that you have received during your alcohol-free journey?
Oh my goodness. So I think that some of the most impactful advice has been some of the things I've had to tell myself. And that probably sounds a little cocky and self-centered, but it was a kind of crickets when I first started into this alcohol-free space. As you mentioned, I've been doing this work for, I'm alcohol-free 7 years, and
Wow,
I started being sober curious 2 years before that. And this movement has only taken off within the past 4 years. So I had this whole period where I didn't have anyone to reach for. But, so one thing that I have had, I'll give you two different answers to this. One is
okay.
very self centered, something I told myself, and then something that is outward. And the internal piece was, really around my own understanding of what it would be like to be in this world and have fun, because I really worry that I'd lose all my friends and be a social outcast, and I wouldn't be able to have fun because that's who I was before I started drinking. I was kind of
Yeah.
the odd, ugly duckling teenager, and I thought alcohol was what made me cool. And I came up with this realization that if something, a person, place, a thing, an activity was not fun without alcohol, it probably just wasn't fun. And I had to rewire my understanding and my beliefs about what fun was and who I like to be around and what I like to do. So that's one. If it's not fun without alcohol, it's probably just not fun. And that's okay. That's okay,
Yeah.
because it's so much more powerful to find the things that are fun and find the people who you are connected with and spend more time with them and more time doing those things. The thing that I think has been most helpful and inspiring to me, I'm seeing in my periphery this quote that's on my wall. It's from Marianne Williamson, and
Mm.
I think that a lot of people have probably heard it before, but I want to read just a little excerpt from it because I think that so many people relate to it. And this is one of the reasons that, you know, existentially, I was drinking, because I felt this way. And so she says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And
Yes.
once I realized that I indeed was powerful beyond measure, I did not want to do anything to hold myself back from that power. And guess what? I still have a plenty long list of self-sabotaging behaviors, but at least I don't have alcohol anymore. At least I
Yes.
don't have that.
Yes. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. When you said that you've been alcohol free for 7 years,
Yeah.
I literally just got chills, because I only got a taste of that for 8.5 months. And I can only imagine what you vibrate at and how connected you are and how strong your intuition is. Like, that is beautiful. Like, I literally got chills when I heard that.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Ah,
It is. It's really, I wanted for this life that I have, and the feeling of the life that I had for so long. I was reading all the self-help books, Gabby Bernstein, Marianne Williamson, Wayne Dyer. I wanted that feeling, and it never hit me. And now that I am alcohol free, all of those things that I was reading about, thinking they were somehow impossible or maybe not available to me, I have them in my life. And also so many of the goals that I wanted. I have my own business. I quit my corporate job. I have these friendships that are beautiful and amazing and actually don't involve alcohol at all. I wrote and published a book with a major publisher. Those things were fleeting dreams before, and they became a very quick and pleasant reality. And it all is I will attribute all of that to the foundation being that I removed alcohol from the picture.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, and if you look at a lot of people that are successful like you, that are reaching their dreams and living the life beyond they ever imagined, they're all alcohol free. Like there's so many of them are alcohol free. And at the end of the day, I don't think people wake up and say, damn, I wish I would have gotten drunk last night. They usually pretty much say, wow, I wish I wouldn't have had that wine, or I wish I could go to the gym right now. So I don't think anyone really wakes up and regrets like, wow, I wish I would have woken up and gotten hammered last night or whatever. I don't think many people say that. So it's really, people listening, I hope they go out and buy Unbottled Potential, because it is such a great read and really gives you a different perspective living an alcohol-free life through a different lens, whether it's, away from alcoholism and addiction and things like that. It really is, go back to the kiwi. It's just about poisoning ourselves that really can hurt our brain and our nervous system, and just disconnecting us from who we are and who we can be. So Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise. How can people find you?
Oh, well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me and for this great conversation. And I am all over the internet at Amanda Kuda. Mostly I hang out on Instagram. But if anything that I shared today resonated, I have, several resources, of course, my book, but just follow me on Instagram and you can poke around and see what resonates with you. And I would love to have you there.
Thank you so much. And again, her book is Unbottled Potential, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Surviving Roots. Let's continue this conversation as a community. For more updates about the show, remember to subscribe on iTunes to leave a review. Also, there will be some special bonus footage from the show on Instagram at Cari.fund. I'll see you there.